So welcome. I'm Winona Bateman. I'm the Executive Director of Families for a Livable Climate. Our mission is to create community for climate action in Montana, and we engage families of all kinds in community-oriented climate events, educational and advocacy opportunities, and leadership. We are very excited about today's webinar. It's our second webinar on federal dollars for Montana schools. And one way we engage parents and caregivers in leadership on climate is through our volunteer-led working groups. And today's Federal Dollars for Montana Schools event was organized by an outstanding group of moms and volunteers who serve on our Healthy Schools for Montana Kids working group. We're so grateful for their efforts. And we're also very grateful to be hosting today's webinar with our friends at Moms Clean Air Force Montana and Montana Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate. Thank you so much for your support and helping us spread the word. This is our second webinar on this topic. The first was held in May, and we will share that recording as well as this one after today's discussion. So we're thrilled to be welcoming our panelists and presenters today. Woody Woodwick of Havre Public Schools Transportation Department, Scott Ryder, the Executive Director of Facilities Service for Billings Public Schools, Steve Love, the Superintendent of Charlotte Public Schools, Matt Thompson with Ameresco, Andrea Swiatoka of the Department of Energy, and Courtney Johnson and Marissa McPhillamy of the Environmental Protection Agency. We are going to have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end of the webinar. Please drop your questions into the chat as we're going along. That's just fine. And we will keep track of them for when we get to the Q&A. Or hold them till the end. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Elizabeth Kwok-Hefferon and Woody Woodwick of Havre Public Schools to kick off our conversation today with electric buses. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Winona. I'm Elizabeth Kwok-Hefferon with the Healthy Schools for Montana Kids Working Group. And Woody, you ready?
Yep, sure.
All right, so can you first tell us about Havre Public Schools and the town of Havre?
Well, we're in north central Montana, about 40 miles from the Canadian border. And our town size is roughly around 10,000. We're a Class A school. We got variable winters, could be harsh to 30 below, and then the next week, 50 above. And we transport about 3,500 students a day, AM and PM combined. And we run a 26 bus fleet. We have 4 motor coaches for trips, 17 diesel buses, 3 gas buses, and 2 electric buses now that we've had in since January.
And what kind of electric buses do you have?
We got Lion Electric, originally a Canadian company, but they are manufacturing in the United States now too.
So kind of overall, have you been pleased with how they've done?
We have been. They've done everything that they said they would. And one of the things Lion, and I believe all the manufacturers are doing it now, is they made them to where they're easy to adapt for like old gray-haired bus drivers. It's not a real wild change. They drive just like a regular bus and do everything like a regular bus. And so that was a good transition. They're pretty easy to adapt to.
So can you tell us about how much it costs, kind of to the comparison between the 3 kinds of buses you have?
We have been monitoring them. Like I said, we put them in service in January. So information we got from January to the end of the last school year. The diesels, we compared 2 diesel buses, 2 gasoline buses, and 2 electrics. And the diesel buses averaged 56 cents a mile. The gas buses averaged 83 cents a mile. And the electric buses averaged 23 cents a mile. That's substantial savings. And that's what we pay for electricity to keep them charged. But it doesn't factor in the fact that we have to plug in and use electricity to keep make our diesel buses start in the morning when it's cold. And we're working on that now. We're working with VEIC and the DEQ on putting some more metering in, so we can actually meter how much we're spending on the electricity for the block heaters compared to the electricity for charging. So we're monitoring pretty close, and we're very successful with them.
And do those numbers include maintenance, or is that just fuel?
That's just for, well, yeah, fuel and charging electricity. So far, our maintenance has been almost minimal. Well, you don't have oil, you don't have transmission fluid, you do have coolant, and so our maintenance costs it's very, very minimal. We've done almost nothing to them. They've just run them. We've had a few recalls. Lion has been good. They've sent techs up to Havre from all over the country for some of the recalls or any warranty issues we've had. So they've been good so far.
Great. And so you said they handle pretty much the same. Like, do you notice any difference driving them?
No, in fact, when I got them first, when I tried to do donuts with them, took them out on the ice in the snow and put them through the paces. I couldn't get them to break loose. They have a traction control system on them that works really well. And the rear end, it's the same rear end as a regular bus. So it has a drive shaft, where like electric cars have a motor on each wheel typically. This has one big electric motor and a drive shaft, so it's essentially the back end is the same as a regular bus. So, and they very, very sure-footed.
Do you have many hills you have to deal with up there?
Not a lot. You notice a little bit, but for the most part, the two routes we have with these buses on, there's not much for hills. There's smaller hills, and so it's negligible. That doesn't take a lot of the charge away.
Tell us about what kind of range you're getting.
The 100-mile range. There's 3 options with Lions, and there's 100, 125, and 150. And our longest route is 80 miles, AM and PM. And so we have one on a rural route. It's in city and rural, and then one in just an in-city route. And so we could get about 2 days without charging on both of them. So it's, 100-mile range. We can't use them for any of our like sporting events that are 300 miles away, but we can use them on any of our routes right now.
And do you find that temperature affects that a lot?
No, not so much. They do have an auxiliary diesel heater, and so it burns diesel just for the heater. It's like a 15-gallon tank, and so that does it keeps it very warm inside, and then it also has electric heat, and so between the two heaters, they stay warm. And it's 30 below, they stay defrosted and stayed warm. When they're plugged in, they have a preheat. We could set the preheat up on them, so like 45 minutes before the route starts, that bus kicks the heaters all on and warms everything up as long as it's plugged in. And so that saves a lot on the battery too. One of the things we did notice with this year, we got about 6 inches of snow already, and it did affect the range a little bit. So it marginal, but did noticeable. Take some of the range down just by pushing snow. Took more power.
Tell us about the charging infrastructure that you installed. Like, where did it go? What do you have?
Well, we keep all of our route buses are inside, so we have three parts to our facility, and one of them is we could park 4 buses in, and we put the 2 chargers in there and dedicated 2 spots for the electrics. So everything is inside. And the charging, we went with Blink chargers with what Lion recommended, and they set us up with that. And that was also 80% was covered by the Volkswagen grant we used to get the buses. And on our building was set up, we have plenty of power in the building. In fact, we've had an audit done. We have room, we could put 2 more chargers in without having to change any of the infrastructure from the power company. So, and it's working well.
Last question for you, Woody. What tips do you have for other schools that are looking to buy or apply for grants for electric school buses?
Absolutely do it. Don't be afraid of the electric buses. They work great. The people we've dealt with were great to buy the buses, and I know the Bluebird and the international dealers, salespeople. They're willing to work with you too, and it's a great opportunity to experiment. These buses were about $350,000 a piece. You know, that's not anything we can afford without a grant. So it's a great way to experiment with them and see if they'll fit. And you know, just don't be afraid of them, and they work good. The ones we have heated seats. The drivers love them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Woody.
Thank you.
We'll probably have some questions for you coming up, I'm sure.
Be happy to.
Okay, great. Well, if you have questions for Woody, type them in the chat, save them until the end. We're going to do, we have a brief Q&A. We might be able to stay 5 minutes late. But thank you so much, Woody. It's so exciting to hear about your buses in action up in Havre. And I'm really excited because we have a very cool follow-up event to today's webinar. And we're hosting, thanks to our Healthy Schools for Montana Kids working group, we're hosting an electric school bus drive and ride on December 14th outside of Missoula at Harlow's Truck. Harlow's, I'm blanking on the full name of it right now. Help me, Elizabeth. Harlow's Truck Center, got it. That's 11 to 1 on December 14th. And we just dropped some info into the chat. You can get the details and find out how to RSVP for that at that link if you're interested. If you got the right license, you can drive it. And if you don't, you can ride in it and take a little tour on and kick the tires and talk to mechanics out there. All right. So now we're going to move on to Scott Ryder, who's going to talk about solar panels. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay. Were you going to ask me questions?
Elizabeth, do you have questions prepared? Do you want to dive in with questions?
Scott, do you want to just go through the list that you have already?
All right. Well, unfortunately, I was the one that thought today was the planning day, and so I don't have a brilliant presentation like Woody had. So I'll just talk a little bit about our solar project at Billings Public Schools. So we started with them, I believe it was back in 2017 or 2018. We actually started because we had a board member who is, her and her husband own an architect firm in Billings, and they are really big into green and energy and self-sustaining, and she really championed this whole start of this projects. So our first one was at Skyview High School, and since then we've installed 6 of them total. They're all 50 kilowatt photovoltaic systems, and we're working on our 7th one right now. And so the process we used for this, the reason we were able to do a lot of these was with help from Northwestern Energy, the USB grant. And they have applications that are due twice a year. One, I believe it's May, and the other in November. And they review the applications and award accordingly to what they have for funding. So anyways, the process for these it's a little backwards. It's in order to fulfill the grant requirements, you need a contractor selected in order to fill out the application. And so normally when we do a project, we have a project in mind, we determine funding, and then we put it out to bid and award a bidder and move through the construction process. But this one here was a little different because we needed to have the contractor on board before we could even apply for the grant to identify any funding in order to approve it. So the process we had, and I have some notes over here I'm going to look back over at, but because of the structure of the grant, we needed but because of the structure of the grant, we had to go about it differently. We needed the contractor to submit the application as there are some components to the application that required the contractor in order to complete the application. We began with some engineering from our electrical engineer. We used Cushing Terrell here in Billings, and he put together an RFP to select a contractor. We moved towards the advertising the RFP. We scored it with our committee and awarded a contractor, which is a little different because the contractor, we weren't bound to the contractor for any funding of any kind or compensation in order to complete the grant unless we were successful. So it is a little bit of a leap of faith for the contractor to take the time to put together a project and fill out the application and get it together. So once they submit the application to Northwestern Energy, they reviewed. They have a 3 or 4 month period where they review, and fortunately, we were successful in the applications. And if we put in May, we were usually notified in August or September. We're given about a 6 month period of time to do construction. They're pretty lenient with that, and then they've allowed extensions due to weather because a lot of ours were installed over the winter. But once we get the notification that we were successful, we'd go back to the board, approve the project, identify the funding, and then move on with the project. So anyways, it's just a little different approach to it. But luckily, we were successful each time we applied for the Northwestern Energy Grant, and it's been very good. Now, our first projects back in the 17-18 period, they came in somewhere around the 90,000 mark for the project, and the USB grant was 50,000. So it was a great project for us, and a lot of savings. They're projected to have. Our engineer had done a modeling of the solar array wherever they're located on the campuses, and it would project how much sun they would get average, and they'd give us a payback on it. So typically they're paying, according to projections, of between 10 to 11,000 per year. So that's right off the top of your energy bills. Ours have been running more of the 8 to 9,000 per year. So still pretty healthy, but not quite. I think it all depends on the weather you have and how much sun you get, and nothing's ever really static. So I'm still pretty happy with them. Anyways, our first ones came back at around 90. So we're looking at a 4 to 5 year payback, which is outstanding with the grant funding. Our later ones, they have since gone up tremendously, the cost of these projects. And a lot of it has to do with the supply of the materials and all that. There was a big deal a few years ago about the solar panels, and they were being taxed on coming back from some components come from China and different areas. But anyways, our latest one came in at 300,000. So we needed more help with that, because if you look at a $10,000 a year payback, that stretches that payback out quite a ways, almost to the end of life of the system. Theoretically, no, they could last a lot longer, but they're projected for that 25-year warranty on those systems. So, and there's not a lot of moving components on it, so they could last 30 or 40 years too. But that's kind of our drop-off point is at that point. So we try to keep it at that 15-year or less payback. And so we also applied for, we were successful with this latest project with Northwestern Energy, and we also went to the city of Billings, has an ESPERA project that they have. It's South Billings Urban Renewal Association, and they do projects in that area. This particular campus lies in that ESPERA, and so we applied for a grant from them as well. And at their last board meeting, they approved it. It just has to go to city council for final approval yet, so it's not official for anything there. But that was another 100,000. So between that and the Northwestern Energy grant, we're at 160,000 and additional funding for these projects, and it makes it a lot more palatable to do the project with that coming in. We've also we finished one at another one of our middle schools, Medicine Crow, this spring, and the federal government has a program. It's I don't know a lot about it yet. It's fairly new for us. It's called Direct Pay, I believe, and we have some help filling out an application, or I don't even know if it's really an application. It's more of a statement of of what you've done, and it qualifies for certain funding back. And we're working with a company called Eide Bailly on filling out the application for that. Hopefully that'll go in this winter and we can be reimbursed a certain dollar amount for Medicine Crow. And if that looks great, we will also do it for the Riverside project this year too. But we couldn't go back to our previous 5 other ones just because they didn't fall in the 2023 year. So that's kind of how our projects went about. So we have them at all 3 of the high schools, and we were working on the middle schools. We have 3 of the middle schools done. This will be our 4th one if we can put everything together, and we'll keep on moving through.
Thank you, Scott. That's so inspiring. So inspiring to hear about your success and progress. We really appreciate you sharing. And I'm sure will be questions. So hang on for the end. All right. Next up, for our presenters, I would like to give the floor to Steve Love, the superintendent of Charlotte Public Schools, and Matt Thompson with Ameresco. And they're going to be talking about HVAC upgrades. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I put a couple of slides together after meeting with Elizabeth and going through kind of the Q&A, so I appreciate her helping get us well prepared. And I love pictures, so I couldn't help myself. I had to put a couple slides together. So as mentioned, I'm Matt Thompson, and we've got Steve, the superintendent of Charlotte Schools, on the line too. Do you want to introduce yourself, Steve?
Good to meet everybody.
So feel free to put questions in the chat anytime. We'll circle back to them at the end, as was mentioned. So first off, I just want to introduce Ameresco. That was one of the questions that I'm getting ahead of myself there. Sorry. That Elizabeth asked. She wasn't familiar with us. And so Ameresco is a leading clean tech and renewable energy integrator. We leverage budget neutral solutions, including energy savings performance contracts, power purchase agreements, and even energy as a service contracts to eliminate the financial barriers that traditionally hamper energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. And most importantly to me, we use energy savings to renew our clients' buildings and improve those facilities. And that improves the lives of the folks who live, work, and play in those buildings and around those communities. So that's why we come to work every day. So a little bit about Charlotte Schools. We've done 1 phase of work there currently, and are excited to get started on a 2nd phase pending the final approval of our Renew America Schools grant. And so a little bit about the existing HVAC system and kind of the reason for us doing the project to begin with. So these schools are quite old. The original elementary school was built in 1919, so over 100 years old. The high school in 1953, and then the junior high is the youngest of the bunch from 1977. And so they were all heated with fuel oil and some propane furnaces. And as you can imagine, given the dates of those facilities and most all of the HVAC equipment being original to those facilities, it was beyond its useful life and failing. The picture there you see up the top right, that's the boiler that served the elementary and high school. It was replaced as part of our phase 1 project. And it was originally a coal boiler. You had to shovel the coal in there, and it was retrofitted at some point during its life to burn fuel oil, but not very efficient either way. The junior high school has newer HVAC equipment from the 70s, from its original construction, has 2 smaller fuel oil boilers and then a couple of furnaces. There were numerous system deficiencies throughout the facility, from the steam lines and condensate return lines, and the steam traps themselves were all leaking, causing a lot of system losses. There was pipe insulation missing or damaged, which obviously loses heat from the system. And then the pneumatic control valves, which you can see in the other picture there is an example of one. They use little air lines to control them, to control the heat valves. Those were failing, causing some classrooms to be cold and some to be hot and just generally uncomfortable. We did some combustion efficiency testing and found that the old steam boiler was actually only 45% efficient when you accounted for all the system losses from those issues with the steam lines and traps, et cetera. So overall, the energy usage intensity, or EUI, it's kind of like the MPG for a car, but in this case, lower is better. It's energy units per square foot. So the energy usage intensity for the Charlotte School District was 111 kBTU per square foot, which is over twice the target for schools. The target for schools is about 48 or 50 kBTU per square foot. So using twice the energy, and they weren't very comfortable either. So not a great situation where we were starting out with. As I mentioned, some of the classrooms were cold and some were hot as a result of those failing control valves. Some of the coils would be wide open, just blasting the heat, and some wouldn't open at all. And then with the original system design, it really didn't have much ventilation bringing in fresh air to the classrooms. And obviously that's a concern for having a healthy learning environment and also preventing illness as much as we can. And of course, as is the case with most schools in Montana, there was no cooling. So one of the big goals with the new HVAC system selection was to move away from fuel oil and propane and electrify the school. The fuel oil cost in particular had gotten quite expensive. I think just in the time that we were working with the district to develop this project, the fuel oil prices shot up nearly double or maybe even over double what they had been the prior year. And the fuel oil and propane prices were just a real roller coaster for the district. And that lack of predictability for their fuel costs was really a big stressor for the folks there at the district. And so we looked at a lot of different options and determined a heat pump system was the ideal solution. Initially, we wanted to go with a geothermal system, but it was quite expensive, over double the cost of an air source heat pump system. And permitting the wells was also going to be a challenge with the water board there. So ultimately, air source heat pumps with electric resistance backup heat was the best option. Some of the advantages of those air source heat pumps are that they're reliable and efficient. They provide much more ventilation air, outside fresh air to the classrooms, improving the indoor air quality. They're much more comfortable. They've got individual control for each classroom. In addition to having reliable heat, they also have cooling now, since it's a heat pump, which is a nice comfort feature for those hot days at the beginning or end of the school year. As we mentioned too, electricity is a much more predictable fuel to use for your energy cost, and we eliminated the fuel and propane, or it will soon be eliminated once we finish phase 2 construction at the junior high. Some of the challenges we experienced, this is probably familiar for a lot of folks if they've done a construction project in recent years after the COVID-19 pandemic. The biggest challenge was probably the long equipment lead times. It took over a year to get some of the equipment. But some other challenges were that we required a significant electrical infrastructure upgrade. So you can see all that nice new switch gear and panel boards and transformer and stuff on the side of the building there. Obviously, going from a fuel oil situation where we're burning fuel oil to go into electricity, need a lot more electrical infrastructure to power all that. There are also these units, in addition to having the fresh air opening, they have a big opening to reject the heat for the heat pump. And so there were large structural openings required for each new HVAC unit. And then, of course, as you can kind of see in that top right picture, there was some really nice woodwork that we wanted to maintain in the classrooms. And so integrating those units into the existing woodwork, where they were a fair bit larger than the original units in most of the classrooms, was also a challenge. But you can see it looks pretty nice right there, and ended up fitting by about a 1/4 inch, I think. So we get a lot of questions about project funding. So there's 2 phases of the project, as I've kind of mentioned. Phase 1 was for the elementary and high school. Those are the oldest parts of the district and were thus the highest priority. So that project was about $2.4 million. And in addition to the HVAC, you also had LED lighting, building envelope improvements, and some destratification fans to make the gym more comfortable. And that was paid for with a combination of funding sources. There was a loan repaid with guaranteed energy savings that we go through a measurement and verification process that's audited by the state of Montana's DEQ office. And in addition to that, we also were able to use some elementary and secondary school emergency relief, or ESSER, funding for a portion of the project, and the balance was paid for with impact aid funding. As I mentioned, the junior high wasn't in the budget for phase 1. We just didn't have enough funding available between those 3 different funding avenues. And so we kind of put it on a shelf. And then we're very fortunate that the Renew America Schools grant came around, and we had all the information ready to go for the facility needs assessment, because we had included it in our audit of the facility originally. And that was about $1.2 million. We applied for the grant in April of 2023 and were selected and are currently going through the award process. And I guess I didn't mention that the graphic here on the right side just kind of shows Energy Performance Contracting, how the guaranteed savings works for helping with debt service on a loan repayment. So with regard to Renew America Schools grant and Justice 40, this was a topic Elizabeth and I talked about at length, and so I wanted to highlight a couple things here. The first step is getting that facility needs assessment and energy audit done, kind of assessing what needs are pressing at the school and what kind of energy savings can be delivered. and all that is kind of the first step. With the application process last spring, it all started with a 5-page concept paper to qualify projects. And then the DOE team reviewed those concept papers and invited folks to submit a full grant application. There were over 1,000 concept papers totaling $5.5 billion in funding requested. 236 of those were invited to move forward with a full grant application totaling now $1.6 billion. And ultimately 24 projects were selected across 22 states totaling $178 million, which is over double the original $80 million funding allocation given the huge interest in the program. So the Justice 40 initiative, that may be something new for some folks on the call. The basic idea is that 40% of federal investments should flow to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, or burdened by pollution. And this ensures that these federal programs not only create jobs, which is one of the primary objectives, but also promote environmental justice and create communities that are more resilient to climate change. And so Charlo fit in the Justice 40 initiative pretty well in a couple ways. The district is Title I, and is located in a rural area that's designated as a disadvantaged community, and it's within the Flathead Indian Reservation. And we also learned throughout the process using some of the tools with the Renew America Schools grant kit that our project's going to help improve not only indoor air quality, but also reduce local air pollution, which in Western Montana, between temperature inversions, pollution from automobiles and trucks and even wood stoves, not adding to that equation by burning fuel oil and propane is going to be a big benefit to local air quality in the wintertime. As far as the project impact, we have improved comfort and energy efficiency. We projected an energy savings of about $73,000 in year one from eliminating that expensive fuel oil, additional annual maintenance savings. And then as far as operations and maintenance goes, Steve can probably speak to this a little bit, but the previous boiler system was, it took a MacGyver approach. It was duct tape and zip ties and a prayer to keep it going. And so the new system is much more reliable and has been a big relief from that old infrastructure, which was near failure point. And maintenance is pretty straightforward, just filter changes, keeping the air intakes clear of debris. You can see in this picture here, those are all the big air intakes that we had to install that allow the fresh air in and also do the heat rejection for the compressors. And annual maintenance is pretty straightforward, just inspecting the units. And last but not least, just advice for other school districts. Think long-term and big picture. Oftentimes folks are just looking for a like-for-like HVAC change out, replacing a boiler with a new boiler, but a completely different system type may be a much better option, providing enhanced comfort, energy savings, and a lower cost of ownership over time. And think big picture, comprehensive facility improvements, including multiple scopes of work like HVAC electrification, LED lighting, building envelope improvements, renewable energy, like we talked about from Billings School District, and more. Those are not only feasible things that do have an adequate payback and can be supported by this grant program, but they can have a really huge impact for your school district and your community. And then last bit of advice for you to get started now. I think the Department of Energy did a really great job streamlining the Renew America Schools grant with the concept paper process and whatnot, but there's still a lot to do. You got to get organized, get all your documentation gathered. And I really suggest getting connected with an experienced partner to help with a facilities needs assessment and navigating that grant application process. And last there, that graphic just kind of shows the different measures that were included in the 24 projects that got selected for the Renew America Schools grant. And you can see it's a very diverse group of technology, from HVAC to solar to even battery storage and alternative fuel vehicles. So it's really a comprehensive program and a great one that I'd encourage you to look into for your district. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve, are you going to jump in?
I would just add things from a school perspective. Like we're in a very, very poor district. And so when this started, about when ESSER came out and we went through the COVID, we got some money, and a good chunk of money that we knew we would never have access to again, probably. And as the superintendent, one of my biggest goals was, okay, what's the best way to spend that money? And HVAC systems was hands down my number one goal. Because like Matt talked about, during the winter months from November through March, I'm literally on the phone every morning at 5 a.m. with my facilities guy, making sure we're going to be able to have school because of the inefficiency and the old system was so unreliable. So that started out with having some money. And then another thing is we went out and went to some conferences, went to some meetings, and started talking with companies like Ameresco. And you've got to develop a trust, and Ameresco has just been perfect for us. I've really enjoyed working with them. Plus I trust them. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have got this far for sure. So I have to give kudos to that company. And so whatever company it is, you got to trust them, and then you got to go with them. And we've done that. It's worked out really, really well. We're looking forward to completing the junior high. We've only had the system going this fall, and we had a very warm fall, and I have ecstatic staff and students because they were able to cool their rooms. It's nothing to have 85, 90-degree rooms. And this fall, when it was that hot, they could turn the air on. And so the comfort has been a big seller, but even more so than that, we're looking forward to seeing those savings. We won't know that until, after we get a year into it probably, but it's been a tremendous improvement, and I'm very proud of what we've done with the money for our community. And I can't say enough about how much Matt and Ameresco and the guys that have worked with us have been so helpful. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Beautiful. Wow. Inspiring. Thank you both. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Steve. We really appreciate you joining. Well, now let's turn to Andrea Swayatoka with the U.S. Department of Energy, who's going to talk briefly about specifically about the Renew America Schools grant. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Andrea Swayatoka. I'm the Schools Portfolio Lead at the Department of Energy for the Renew America Schools program. And I could not have been set up in a better spot thanks to Matt and Steve. I feel like I don't even need to give my presentation. They did a great job. So I do have a lot of repeats, so I'll try not to repeat, but maybe highlight a few key things that I want to make sure that people take away. And I also have actually a couple colleagues on the call, but Michelle Tang on my team, she's a project officer actually working directly on the Charlo project, as well as the other Montana project with Lynette Public Schools. She's going to put a few links in the chat as I go so that you all have access to this information. So just to recap, and if you missed the first round, Montana actually had a really great presence in the first round, but if you are on the call or you're listening to the recording and you missed it, you did not miss the only opportunity. So we received $500 million over 5 fiscal years. We released the first round of funding, as Matt mentioned, back in June of 2023, and we awarded 178, and I'll show you more of that information. But we will be releasing a second round of funding in the spring of 2024. So if you go to the link that Michelle will put in, and at the top of that webpage, I would recommend everyone sign up for updates. That's the best way you get added to the listserv, and you'll receive regular updates from us, and certainly the status of when that next funding round is available. Just wanted to highlight the different types of improvements that are eligible. And I think that's what I love most about this grant. It's pretty all-encompassing. And so it involves things such as HVAC, as you heard with Charlo, but also lighting upgrades, envelope. So that could be sealing the windows, that could be new exterior insulation. Windows and doors are eligible, new roofing insulation with the roof membrane, solar, any type of control, switchgear upgrades, as well as alternative fueled vehicle, both the vehicles as well as the infrastructure. So people have really been thoughtful about the combination of those elements that they want to include. There was no limit on the amount of improvements or the number of buildings. It'll remain the dollar threshold. So eligibility in terms was anywhere from 500,000 up to 15 million. And this money does go directly to the local education agencies. You all are the eligible entity. Oftentimes DOE money goes to the state level and then possibly filters down. But I do want to emphasize that as the eligible entity, it is that local education agency. And I think that's really important. I think just high level too, we always like to share a little bit of our goals as we think about this new program. This is the first time that DOE has ever had an exclusive program just for K-12 public schools to fund them directly. And so with federal money does come a lot of strings, as folks on here can tell you. And we're doing our best to really minimize that administrative burden and really hoping that some of these, become that shining star for others. I loved actually hearing about the electric vehicles and the solar, because all of that plays into us having that success and impact on the climate. So this is from the last round, but I did want to share this just to kind of give you a glimpse. We are working on the program design for the next one, with the intent of keeping a lot of what we had in there from last time and really improving it. But we released initially 180 million. We ended up awarding both fiscal year FY22 and 23, and so released 178. But you can see here the awards amounts are from that 500,000 up to the 15 million. You have 24 to 60 months to implement from the time of award. And what was really incredible for us, it is pretty normal for a federal cost share to be at that 50% mark. We were able to reduce the cost share down to 5%, which is really unheard of. That is a big waiver for us to receive. And we were really excited for that, just knowing that you all at the school level don't have the ability to probably match at the 50%. And then we'll share these slides so you guys will have access, but the green bar and box to the right just kind of shows you the timeline. So probably similar, we do anticipate doing a concept paper because we do think that was pretty successful and helpful. That'll likely be due about 2 to 2.5 months post the funding opportunity release. And then about another 2 to 3 months following concept papers, the full applications will be due. So I love Matt's advice. We're telling everyone that it's spring of 2024, start planning. It does move quickly after we release a funding opportunity. And so now is your time to think about any partnerships that you want or what types of improvements that you do want to propose within your buildings. Again, Matt did a great job of highlighting all of this. One thing I wanted to highlight on the concept paper, we did receive a really great demand. The way that the concept paper process works is it is a much lower lift from a full application. It was a 3-page short description. Here are the schools that I want to impact. Here are the types of improvements. We needed information on the need, and there's a link and a required website for you all to use for that, and then the facility needs assessment. But what this does is as long as you submit a concept paper, I did want to clarify this for everyone, you are still eligible for full applications. So you receive something called an encourage or discourage to really give you a sense of, did you hit the mark for what DOE is looking or did you not? But regardless, if you get an encourage or discourage, it does not prevent you from submitting a full application. So we received 236 full applications, but almost a third of those actually received discourage. So I do want to make sure that's clear. That's been a point of confusion for a lot of people. People got a discourage, thought they weren't actually eligible to apply for the full application. That's very much not the case. We actually have a selectee that we're in negotiations with right now that received a discourage. They took that opportunity at the concept paper to say, man, we're not hitting the mark here. Let's rethink what we want to propose. And they really revamped their application. So don't get discouraged. It's really there to help kind of guide you all. A full application is no small task to submit. There's a number of required documents. And so it kind of helps guide you as you think about moving into that next phase. These are the 24 school districts that we're in negotiations with right now that will hopefully wrap up in the coming months. Did want to highlight the 2 schools and I have a quick summary slide, although Charlo did a much better example on their project. But there's a summary slide on our website of all 24 of these projects. It spans 22 states, and we're really excited, anywhere from HVAC, and I'll show you another summary too, from solar to controls to lighting. So we really had quite a span of requests and the type of improvements that we're funding. One thing I wanted to highlight here on this slide, since these stats were already shared, is really the electrification. I think Charlo is a great example of that. That is not required in our grant, but we really saw that as a common theme and interest across the applicants. HVAC, from concept paper through full application to what we ultimately funded, remained the top requests, which probably comes at no surprise. That is the biggest pain point right now for schools across the country, to try to keep schools open whether it's hot or cold. It depends on where you are in the country. It is a battle. There's someone in the newspaper every day that has closed schools as a result of HVAC. And so I know we're very excited to be funding a lot of that across the country. And 15 of those 21 projects that do have HVAC are moving towards that electrification. I mean, anywhere from coal, propane, fuel oil, into electrification. So besides Charlo, Gwinnett Public Schools, and I believe they're actually on the call, so did want to call them out. They're one of our other Montana schools that was selected in this first round. They're doing a number of improvements at their building, ranging from HVAC, lighting, solar, and envelope. So we're excited to be working with them as well. And this summary, as well as the Charlo one, and I won't go into that because, again, Matt did a much better job of explaining the project, but these are all found for all 24 selectees on our website in case you're kind of curious what people are doing and what their projects are. So I know we're running short on time. I did want to just quickly run through a couple other opportunities within DOE. This is separate and different from the grant funding. This is called the Efficient and Healthy Schools Program. It is a free technical assistance program available for all K-12 schools. You simply sign up and join from the link, hopefully in the chat. And with that, you receive direct expert consultation through one of our DOE national labs called the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, as well as our partner at New Buildings Institute, or NBI. So if you submit, and it's really wide ranging, you could say, hey, I want to start to think about sustainability in my climate action plan, but I really don't know how to get started. What are your recommendations? You could be at that place. You could say, hey, I implemented a few energy efficiency improvements last summer, but they're not quite tracking to what we thought. Are we maintaining it? Are we operating it wrong or differently? And so they can really meet you where they are. We have a really great team working on this. And the other component with it is we are offering annual recognition. So last year for school year 22-23, we recognized 17 schools, and those can be found here on the Efficient and Healthy Schools Program website in a few different categories. There's no funding with this, but we have found that with the recognition, it really helps them as they think about moving towards maybe some of the decarbonization or climate or sustainability goals that their school district might have. And this is what the website will look like when you navigate to it. I did want to highlight the resource tab. Whether you reach out and decide to join or not, there are also a number of different resources on here, which are incredibly helpful. They link to other agencies or other outside groups, and they've been categorized. Matt mentioned Energy Savings Performance Contract. There's some great documents in there if you haven't ever explored that opportunity, anywhere down to lighting and HVAC. And the other DOE program that I wanted to share was the Better Buildings Challenge, Better Climate Challenge. So 2 different pathways. This is also another technical assistance offering. So really 2 pathways depending on where you are in your school district. If you're feeling that you are ready and ambitious to want to reduce your energy intensity by at least 20%, could certainly be higher over a 10-year plan, we would suggest that you would participate in the Better Buildings Challenge. If you want to be a little more ambitious and you want to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, as well as to at least 50% from an energy intensity use reduction, still over a 10-year, you could submit and participate in the Better Climate Challenge. And this next slide just shows you sort of the resources that become available to you as making sort of that commitment to either of those 2 pathways. So you'll really be put in a big network of people. You'll have peer-to-peer networking. You'll have technical assistance. ICF is one of our big providers that helps support this program. And so it's another great technical assistance opportunity. I know across the country, a number of school boards are passing climate action plans, decarbonization plans, and often then the school is left with, what do I do and how do I accomplish that? And so that's really what these programs are set up for you to sort of, you might have been handed something or said, we want you to achieve this, and then you need to try to figure out what to do from there. And so these are really great pathways for you all. And the last opportunity I wanted to share is not DOE, but has been referenced. And so wanted to share and make sure everyone's aware. I often share this as sort of a caveat because it really impacts a lot of the work that DOE is doing. What's great about, so has 2 different names, can be called elective pay or direct pay. I can't remember what the gentleman earlier referred to it as, but this is the new tax credit. For the first time, back in August of 2022, when the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, passed, tax-exempt entities, aka schools, are now eligible for tax credits. You all can actually get this tax money back. This is the first time this has ever happened. This is all post-construction, so you need to put up that solar, install the geothermal. I always tell people, when we talk to schools, you really think of it from an August timeframe. That's often when things get installed and wrapped up. So if you install your solar in August of 2024, you would then submit a pre-application in January of 2025, and then your full tax filing in May of 2025. And then shortly after that, receive the tax credit back. There's a wide range of percentages of the amount that you can receive back from the overall cost of the project. And those really get into the weeds, but we would recommend going to the IRS website. They have a lot of great information on there. What's great about this, at least for the first 50%, is this is not a competitive grant. The money is there. You're not competing against anyone. As long as you can show that you've met the domestic content, you will receive that 10%. As long as you can show the Energy Communities bonus, you will get that 10%. Very different than a lot of the grants that are out there. The only one that is an application process and does have a fixed amount that DOE is managing, not my team, but a whole other team in DOE, is the low income communities bonus. And you can pretty quickly sort of look at the map and determine if your schools fall in that category. And then the last thing that I'll just highlight on the elective pay and direct pay, and this is true for both DOE grants. EPA has a number of grants, certainly their big electric school bus grant. With elective pay, you're actually allowed to stack, and that's not usually normal. So for instance, even in our Renew America schools, we've had a lot of conversations. Usually folks want to combine the ESSER funds, which is federal funds. You cannot actually use that as cost share with our grant. Usually you can't sort of co-locate federal funds together. Because this is a tax credit, you're able to. So we've given two different examples here. And so there's certainly a little bit of strategy in this. If the solar project is $1 million and you receive $700,000 in grant and you meet the criteria to get the tax credit, you'd be eligible for $300,000 back. Versus if it's $1 million and the grant funds $950,000, even if you're eligible for more, you would only be able to receive that $50,000 back because you cannot exceed the total cost. So I know this is a lot to digest, but something to think about as you consider the various grants that are available. And I'll just end, we do have a couple highlights tomorrow. We are hosting a webinar where we're gonna highlight some of the powerful partnerships with schools. We actually have 7 school districts that'll be joining us. It's at the top of our website. You can register for that. We'll have a recording. I know it's last minute for a lot of folks. So if you haven't already registered, feel free to watch the recording. Ameresco will be on there for one of their other projects through a different school district in Indiana with us. It's one of the 24 selectees. So I liked, Steve, your suggestion. The partnerships, there's a lot of federal money out there and it's overwhelming and it's complex. So find the partner that works for you. There's not a perfect answer for anyone. Find that right partner that works for you to really help you navigate some of this.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was amazing. And we'll get your slides as part of the follow-up and share them. Wonderful. We are running short on time. We try to end on time or as close to on time as possible. So we have 2 more folks who are going to visit with us and do and talk about the EPA's Clean Bus program. And what I would say, what I want to suggest is that if you have questions for us, will you please drop them in the chat? And we might have time for 1 or 2 questions today. I do want to end as close to on time as possible. And if not, we'll collect them and we'll work with our presenters to crowdsource some answers for you and send it in the follow-up. How does that sound? Does that work for everyone? Can we bug our presenters for a little bit longer after this event is over? Wonderful. Okay, I think that would be a great way to deal with our time shortage because it's all such great information and I didn't want to cut any of you off. So, all right, so now we are moving on. We are going to hear from Courtney Johnson and Marissa from the EPA about the Clean Bus Program. And I'm just going to drop in the chat another pitch for our drive-in ride on December 14th. Join us here over in Missoula or outside Missoula. Details at that link. Okay, Courtney and Marissa, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Winona. So I am first going to add the link to the program guide in the chat for those who would like to follow along. And I will share my screen. I believe this is the right one. Okay. So again, my name is Courtney Johnson, and I'm presenting with Marissa McPhillamy. So just an overview, I will be discussing the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill as we like to call it, which offers $5 billion over 5 years for the replacement of existing school buses. And today I'll be focusing more closely on the 2023 rebate opportunity. So I won't go through all of this because I feel like we have a enough explanation on why we should go green. The main focus, clean air and improving student attendance and achievement. So I'll quickly go over rebates versus grants. Again, this is the 2023 rebate opportunity. Rebates are quick and simple. It does not take a long, detailed application. It's a random number generated lottery process, so we will not be going through and scoring applications. A downside is we provide a little less support and flexibility in funding to selectees. And we have funding for up to 25 buses for this program. Prioritization criteria has changed since the 2022 rebate program. We are only funding 43 rural remotes. That was the same as the grant opportunity. So if you know more about the 2023 grant opportunity, the prioritization criteria has not changed. But if you're familiar with the 2022 rebate opportunity, it has changed. So please pay close attention to this information here, which can also be found in the rebate guide. We also are providing less funding for the replacement of school buses. However, we have an information on tax credits. So some selectees may be eligible for IRA tax credits applicable to their bus and infrastructure purchases, which is not reflected in this funding table, which again can be found in the guide. And here's just some important dates to remember. The most important that stands out currently is January 31st by 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is the application deadline. And if you have more questions for us, Region 8 folks specifically, we are holding office hours. I believe those go until the end of January. So please look out for emails, or if you would like our information or more information on these office hours, we are more than happy to send you such. So I know that was super fast. I'll stop sharing. But again, if you have questions for us, please just let us know. And perfect, 12 o'clock. Thanks, Winona.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing. I was like, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Well, wonderful. So let's say we have time for maybe one question. And I don't see any dropped in the chat, but does anyone want to jump in with a question?
I have one.
Okay.
Scott, when we talked earlier, you mentioned that students and teachers are using the solar panels like as part of the curriculum. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, I can try. I don't teach any of the classes, but I can tell you what I know about them. So each of the systems are monitored over the network, and there's a website that we use to monitor each system. So each school has the ability to access that and see what the daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, or life of system output is for any of the photovoltaic systems. There's also a monitor in each classroom, or not in each classroom, in each school that shows the current output of each system, and you can toggle through it, or it can slide through it showing what each one will do and how much it's put out and saved energy that way. At some of the systems, there's also the way it worked out, the grant would only allow up to a 50 kilowatt system to be funded for the USB grant through Northwestern Energy. But to fill out a rack, there typically was an extra spot there. So they may have another panel at some of the schools that the classes could go out with their teacher or instructor and connect to and do different experiments and whatnot. And it's all good for teaching the students about alternative forms of energy and what they can do, and it's just a great education for them. Now, how they're actually used in the schools, I couldn't tell you. I don't sit in the classrooms.
Great, thank you so much, Scott. Okay, last call for questions in the chat. We are going to wrap things up because we like to end on time. You are all busy people. You have kids, you have jobs, you're running a school. So we're really grateful to all of our presenters for joining us today. Thank you so much for your time and taking the time to share your expertise with Montana communities. And I'd also like to thank Moms Clean Air Force Montana and Montana Health Professionals for Healthy Climate for co-hosting and spreading the word about this event. We're really grateful. We will send a follow-up email to you and everyone else who registered. And you can watch for that. We'll have the registration link for our December 14th event and all the resources shared in the chat today. If you want to connect with our Healthy Schools group, go ahead and reach out to me and I will connect you with them. And until next time, thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.